I'm going to read two poems from my latest book, The Mother House. The first one is called Maria Edgeworth in 1847, and it comes from two things. One is a story that I read when I was a child, which she wrote, about a little boy who made money by putting a stone behind the wheels of a carriage that had to stop on a steep hill. And the other thing is something that was written by her stepmother, who was younger than her, in her memoir of Maria Edgeworth. And I put the two things together, the idea that the child who had to wait for farthings thrown from a coach grew up to be a dock worker in America. What Frances Edgeworth wrote was, she was touched by the generosity of the porters who carried the rice and India meal to the vessels for shipment to Ireland in the famine, refusing all payment, and she knit with her own hands a woolen comforter for each porter of bright and pretty colours, which she sent to a friend to present to the men, who were proud and grateful for the gifts. But alas, before they received them, those kind hands were cold, and that warm heart had ceased to beat. Maria Edgeworth in 1847. Anger, work, confusion. What is to be done? The Atlantic in the way and the news getting worse. Work stretching to occupy every hour in the day, carrying back and forth, lifting, bearing and setting down. We are in the centuries when work told the body how to lift, fasten and drag. The weight of the world needed heaving. When the horses staggered and slowed on the steep hill, the coach too full, too heavy to drag onwards, they stopped fearfully, and the child from the cabin was waiting for his chance. He ran out with a stone, pushed it behind the wheel so the horses could breathe, and waited for the farthings flung from the passengers' windows. Now he is carrying sacks of meal to the boat, back and forth, loaded, then free, and the work stretching ahead, like the road where at the same moment Maria Edgeworth walks out, her young servant beside her, carrying the basket that gets a bit lighter at every cabin door. This is her work now at the end of her life. At home, she sits down to the story she is writing, line after line, her hand straying back and forth across her remaining pages. The child from the cabin is a man carrying meal to the docks, and at last the day is over and time for him to be paid. But he's too angry, his colleagues are too angry to take money for helping to feed starving people. And she, who is not ever recorded as being angry, takes out her knitting needles and the long skeins of wool the women have spun in the cabins to make a warm comforter for every man, her needles twitching back and forth until the work is done. She is famous and fortunate. She will be remembered. Like the girl whose brothers were turned into swans, she does what she knows, the long scarves piling softly beside her chair, one after the other, like the days. The men are far from home when her gift reaches them, the trace of their work unravelling like a worn thread of wool, their kindness out of anger stretched out across the Atlantic for an answer. The second poem I'm going to read is shorter. It's also more mysterious. It's about my life and things perhaps that I don't understand in it. It's called A Journey. I went driving through the countries where I could read the names, the posters outside cinemas, the leaflets in the churches. The scripts began to slow me down after the mountain border climb, and beyond the roadblock I could see only the shapes, the shed end and the parked van and the slow motion shadow of somebody at the edge of the road. I looked again at the deep wound in my arm. It was all cleaned and covered up so as not to frighten the children. I'm going to finish with a poem by my old friend Pierce Hutchinson. There are many poems of his that I might have read, but I've always had a particular affection for this early one of his. It's called A Man. The reason I think that I always keep coming back to it is that it's just about what we're doing when we write poetry. We're trying to reach people across a barrier, but what on earth is it that they're hearing? A man. A man is screaming in his bathroom, and the neighbours mistake it for singing. The door is locked, the windows barred, but the noise goes through the walls, and the neighbours mistake it for singing. One says, "He hasn't a note in his head." Another, "He sounds happy, the monster." And a foreigner strolling in the street below marvels. What exuberance, what brio these people have. What noise can the man himself think he is making?
Hello everybody, Ciaran Berry here, wishing Gallery a happy 50th anniversary. I'm going to read 2 poems from my last book, which is Liner Notes, and then I'm going to read a poem from Ciaran Carson's Collected Poems, a book that everybody should own. The first poem I'm going to read is called John Peel Mixtape. John Peel Mixtape. Frequency and wavelength, static of the in-between. Like a telescope, the antenna opens towards where the song begins. Whatever seaside dive or bedsit room in which my finger hovers over a record button, red as the wedding suit you wore in homage to your favorite team. I press down again on where I am some phrase or other, lost in a scratch on the last track side 2, or a mixtape come unspooled and wound like tinsel round the sprocket-shaped fir trees, where these days my father hangs up giveaway CDs to keep the blackbirds from his raspberries. Exmal Deutschland, alternative TV, a festive 50 at the arse end of the 80s, at number 43, the mega city 4. I check the mirrors and reverse towards where you've pulled the car over to the shoulder to listen in as that ex-choir boy from Rosemount sings of his teenage dreams. And isn't it about time we heard again the best record in the history of the world? That kick and snare counting, that chord sequence, a first line you would choose as your last line. All of those Friday nights I set the dial and waited for you to fill the room with sound, collateral, and yes, incompatible. Sham 69, the desperate bicycles, another session by the mighty fall. Marquis Smith stalking the live room like a starved animal before he smacks the drummer and sacks the band entire. I spike my hair with egg whites and icing sugar. I put on my hair shirt and my winkle pickers and step to where I am once more, half man, half biscuit, and all I want for Christmas is a Dukla Prague away kit. And this one's called The Death of Elvis. This lip, too, used to curl a little easier, and we all of us must enter our Vegas years. Blessed the pacemakers, blessed the painkillers, blessed our famed quiffs, grown flyaway, grown thin, the grey starting to sprout under the dye. So much to hide beneath the spit and mascara, so much to powder puff and trim. Nose hairs, for instance, and sideburns, the skin seasick as we're made to play dress-up one final time. A daughter's bracelet slipped over a wrist, and for the ring finger, a lightning bolt ring. How far we venture from a love of peanut butter and Wonder Bread. How far from a Stutz Blackhawk and Khalil Gibran. From codeine, meperidine, diazepam, the room with the teddy bears and the empty syringe. How far from the last book we dived into to learn about sexual positions and astrological signs, and far too from the myth of our baritones coming alive in Tupelo, of how we could turn on and off the rain. That's the way the mop flops, I think he'd say, as they lay him out flat under the chandelier, then in the limousine. That's the way the mop flops as 5 men enter his mausoleum with water, cement, and a wheelbarrow full of sand. The instruments set down, the stage lights dimmed. Thank you very much. Good night, Graceland. So the poem by Ciaran that I'm going to read is Belfast Confetti, which I'm sure you all know. Belfast Confetti. Suddenly, as the riot squad moved in, it was raining exclamation marks, nuts, bolts, nails, car keys, a fount of broken type, and the explosion itself, an asterisk on the map. This hyphenated line, a burst of rapid fire. I was trying to complete a sentence in my head, but it kept stuttering. All the alleyways and side streets blocked with stops and colons. I know this labyrinth so well. Balaclava, Raglan, Inkerman, Odessa Street. Why can't I escape? Every move is punctuated. Crimea Street, dead end again. A Saracen, Kremlin 2 mesh, McAuliffe face shields, walkie-talkies. What is my name? Where am I coming from? Where am I going? A fusillade of question marks. Thank you for your time, and again, congratulations to Gallery on their 50th.
Hello, I'm John McAuliffe, and I'm going to read 3 poems now as part of this celebration of 50 years of the Gallery Press. One of the great joys of being published by the team at Gallery is the poets that I have been published alongside. And many of the finest poets that work in Ireland over the last 20 or 30 years that I've been writing poetry seriously came to me through the books that they published with Gallery. One of those poets is somebody who I've been reading ever since I started writing poetry seriously and began putting my own books together. And I'm going to read one poem from my great friend and my colleague here at Manchester, Von O'Rourke's selected poems. And the book that I'm going to read from is Spindrift, which was Vona's 5th book. And I'm going to read a poem called Bodkin. And Bodkin has this sort of amazing sense in it of being carried away by the sounds that words make, and then having a sort of precise attention to how those sounds work to generate ideas and this tone, which I recognize so clearly as Vona's tone in her poems, as kind of a challenge to you as she makes up these images. Bodkin. A word from a dream, or several, spiked on it like old receipts. Something akin to a clavicle's bold airs, a measurement of antique land, a keepsake brooch on a quilted silk bodice, a firkin filled to the brink with mead or milk, a bobbin spinning like a back-road drunken bumpkin, borrowed, half-baked prophecies in a foreign tongue, a debunked uncle's thin bloodline, a Balkan fairy story, all broken bones poked inside out, a bespoke book blacked in with Indian ink, a bobolink in a buckeye or a bare-backed oak, a barren spindle choked ankle-high with lichen, a fistful of ball bearings dropped on a bowron, body skin, kith and kin, other buckled things. So that's Vona's poem Bodkin from her selected poems. And I'm going to read one poem from my own new book, the Kabul Olympics, which came out in April. And then I'm going to present a short video GIF of some images that I asked my daughter Roisin to make for a poem called Growth. So the first poem I'm going to read is the first poem from the Kabul Olympics. The book came out in April, an inauspicious time to publish a book, but I am very happy with the book, that it was able to get finished and to get out after this terrible spring that we've had. And this poem, Germany, the first poem in the book, is the sense of being all at sea and in the dark, which this poem has spoke for me throughout this last few months. Germany. You feel free on its motorways at night. Caution another language as you slip endless summer roadworks, new words draped over signposted place names and numbers you'd anyway found hard to trust. Oh, this driving into the dark. Shift the full beams to dips until, pushing when you ought to pull, they go out and you rocket into a silence where no one knows what you are. Black Hanoverian nights in the heart of July. And on the other side of this almost silent vacuum, wait, unbelievably, 8 days of hating rye bread, Hefeweizen, borscht, hot nights ending on a sofa bed wedged against a pointless radiator. But now, wheel spinning through black German forest, cities a rumour you will not snatch at, is to be content for once, all in, completely alone and certain as an engine, going for the exit, full tilt among the folk songs. So that's Germany, first poem in the Kabul Olympics. And the next poem that I'm going to read begins with an epigraph from Gerard Manley Hopkins, and it's an epigraph which my editor at Gallery, Peter Fallon, also chose as the epigraph for his selected poems, The News and Weather. And it's a great phrase of Hopkins's, and its recycling shows how multi-purpose poems can be, and I suppose what we want our poems to be. And the images that you'll see, as I say, are dreamt up by my daughter Roisin. And I will leave you with that. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. Growth. There's an epigraph to this poem by Gerard Manley Hopkins. Long live the weeds. Spiny green uprights spindle jointed tent-pole arms over the yellowing green, drawing sunlight into the earth, hollow aerials for an inch-deep neurosis that sprawls under the ground. From next door, beneath slatted timber I've tilted so it makes a fence, a useless, purely decorative backdrop to their green points. Drought, salt, poison, uprooted, snapped, set aside, bales of them wilt and brown. Yet up stand the new dewy tips I would stunt and control, the ones and twos of their branching, high-waving distractions lording it over the slow blades, and these far-flung bristles say nothing to what is galloping underneath. They know neglect and care and do well by either. My tending, choosy cutting and levelling intentions just something else to withstand, toppling up into the rain, as I do, not exactly equal or opposite to such sideways green example.